So, have you ever come across this scenario before while using the FMDataLab Moneyball tool?
Something you will get when you're exporting players is an amazing performer that plays in the Thai second division. And if you're performing really well in that league, is that as good as performing okay in the championship? It's just not, is it? They're not really comparable, which, by the way, I spoke to the people at FMDataLab, and that is something that is coming in the future where there will be a bit of a multiplier based on which league they play in. So you'll be able to, so the data that you're getting will also reflect what league they're playing in as well, which could be a bit of a game changer.
So yeah, turns out not all leagues are built the same, and that's exactly where the new League Multipliers feature comes in to save the day. So League Multipliers let you level the playing field a bit by tweaking player stats based on the strength of the league that they play in compared to the one that you're currently managing in. You can set a base multiplier for each league from 0 to 10, which then adjusts the stats of players up or down to reflect how tough the competition is. And if you want to get a little bit more hands-on, you can also adjust multipliers for particular stat groups inside each league. So if a league's passing numbers are decent, but their defending is a bit sandy league, you can adjust the multipliers for the relevant stat groups to reflect this. These adjusted stats feed into how players are ranked and compared across the Moneyball tool. So it's not just window dressing, these numbers directly impact stats that give you a bit more context and help filter out those players who would not be up to competing in your league, as their stats may simply be inflated as they play at a much lower level. Just a heads up, they are saved in your browser, so if you open up the tool on a different device or a browser or a private window, these values won't carry across. So then, what's the actual benefits of League Multipliers? Like, what do you get out of setting them up? Well, for starters, they let you properly weigh up player stats in the context of where they're actually playing in. By adjusting the numbers based on league strength, you give yourself a much fairer comparison between players from different backgrounds. It's a bit like turning on the lights in a dark room. The data was always there, but now you can actually see what it means. A player bossing it in the Lithuanian second tier isn't necessarily going to have the same impact against Man City, funnily enough, and vice versa. Someone struggling in a top division might still be better than someone shining in a much weaker league. Now, one of the more exciting upsides here, at least for those who enjoy a good bargain, is it can help you spot these hidden gems. A player absolutely smashing it in a smaller league might still have the ingredients to step up. If their adjusted stats still hold up well when compared against your league standards, that's your cue to take a closer look. Cheap, under the radar signings that can punch above their weight, that's what you love to see. And of course, it works both ways. It stops you getting carried away with players who are putting up big numbers in leagues that don't offer much resistance. Sometimes you'll see someone with outrageous stats, then you'll realise they're playing against part-timers with questionable levels of ability. Multipliers can help you tone down the hype and focus on what really matters. And finally, there's a long game here. These aren't just for scouting the next transfer, they also give you a bit of extra perspective for long-term planning. Whether you're tracking the development of a young player across different leagues, or planning a promotion push and trying to work out who might not make the cut at the next level, League Multipliers give you more to go on than just vibes. Right, quick word of warning before you go all in on these League Multipliers. They're brilliant, don't get me wrong, maybe a little bit biased there, but they're not magic. You still got to be aware of the odd curveball here. The values of the multipliers themselves, they're subjective. There's no universal truth to how strong a league is. It's based on your understanding of the football world in your save. Also worth saying, these multipliers are a lens, not a crystal ball. They don't factor in things like whether a player's got a good personality, has a lot of determination, can adapt to your tactics, or just turns into a ghost every time it rains. So don't ditch the human part of scouting. And watch out for bias sneaking in. It's easy to start trusting the numbers a bit too much. A player might get penalised for just being in a weaker league, even if they're perfect for your system. Or, the other way around, looking better than they are just because they play for a fashionable club or it's a league of your home or rival nation. So how do the League Multipliers actually get applied? So the tool looks at the base statistics. These are the statistics that you upload to FMDataLab directly from what's exported in Football Manager. That's stats like XG, tackles completed, that sort of thing. And it splits each of these up into different statistic groups. These are all the stat group columns that you see in the table, for example. Each of these groups get adjusted based on the multiplier you've set for that player's league. By default, the whole league's multiplier value gets passed down to all these stat groups. But you can tweak each stat group multiplier. Say, you reckon a league's crossing is better than what the base league multiplier would suggest. Additionally, You also have a subset of stats that are computed metrics. These are derived from formulas involving multiple of the base stats that are affected by League Multipliers. For example, we have derived stats like non-pen XG per shot. That isn't something that FM gives you directly, it's derived from a few other stats like shots, XG and penalties taken. Since those base stats are being adjusted by League Multiplier, the derived stat ends up being indirectly affected too. Same goes for things like computed stats like finisher that blends together XG, goals, shots on targets per 90, penalties taken and penalties scored into a single figure. Also there are action stats like creative actions per 90 that pulls in assists, clear-cut chances created, open play, crosses completed and open play key passes. So if any of the core stats shift due to League Multipliers, so do the derived stats that rely on them. There are some stats that don't really make too much sense to adjust based on league, like offsides or yellow or red cards. They're usually too random or not really tied to league difficulty, or are percentage stats where the parts of the equation scale the same, so the end result doesn't change anyway. I've left those well enough alone. There's also a little bit of logic behind how the tool handles how multipliers are applied to certain stats. Like with most stats where more of that stat value is better, like key passes, interceptions, goals for example, the base stat then gets multiplied by the multiplier value. Player with 10 goals, then with a League Multiplier applied of 1.2, now has 12 goals. But if it's a stat where it's better that the stat value is lower, like possession lost or minutes per goal for example, the figure then gets divided by the multiplier instead. And just to be clear at this stage, if a player's in a league that isn't in your multiplier list, their stats stay exactly as they are. So it's not trying to guess stuff that you haven't defined. No multiplier, no adjustment. So, if you're wondering exactly which stats are adjusted by League Multipliers, you can find the full breakdown in the Moneyball tutorial. There's a brand new section called How to Apply League Stat Multipliers, and tucked inside that, you'll find another section called Which Stats Are Affected by League Multipliers. That's where you'll find every base, derived, computed and action stat that gets adjusted by the multiplier, ordered into which stat groups each one belongs to. So a question you might have at this point is, how do you actually determine what multiplier to add for a league? Well, it's part science and part guesswork really. There's no perfect answer, every save's a bit different, but here's a few solid ways to help you land on numbers that actually make sense. So first up, if a few players that move from a particular league to your league, keep an eye on how their stats change over time. Like, did their goals dry up more? Are they racking up more key passes than before? That sort of thing can really help you spot how demanding each league really is. Then there's the roll score comparisons. So FMDataLab lets you compare roll scores across different leagues using the roll scores tool. So you can check, for example, how ball winning midfielders are getting on in Serie A versus the Scottish Premiership. It's a nice shortcut to understanding how developed or competitive certain roles are in different leagues. You can also have a look at transfer values and wages. It's not flawless, but higher wages and bigger fees usually suggest stronger leagues. Just don't take it too literally. So yeah, handy, but don't base everything on it, as playing in some leagues do come at a premium. Another trick is to check league and club reputation. You'll find this in FM itself. It's those star ratings on the league or club pages. It's especially useful if you're setting up multipliers and batches, like giving different multipliers for each half star in league reputation. And finally, you've got continental rankings and coefficients. Basically, has this league done anything worthwhile in a continental competition lately? If their clubs are getting battered in their continental qualifiers, that might be a sign that their domestic stats need toning down a bit. You don't want inflated numbers like sneaking in from a league that just folds the moment they leave home soil. So there are two ways of getting cracking on with the League Multipliers once you have uploaded your Moneyball data. The first option is to hit the League Multipliers button. That'll open up the Add League Multipliers dialog, where you can assign values to any leagues found in your uploaded HTML file. Second option is on the Moneyball table. So you can see in the division column in the table, if you do spot a player from a league you haven't set a multiplier for yet, you can click on the little plus icon next to the league name in the row. This opens up the same dialog but with the player's league already filled in. Once you've opened the dialog with the League Multipliers button, you can click on the Add League Multiplier to insert a new row. But if you come from the second option from the division cell, in which case it'll already be there waiting for you. So you can use the league drop down to pick a league you want to apply a multiplier to. It only shows leagues you haven't applied a multiplier to already to keep things tidy and avoid duplicates. Then you can set your league multiplier value using the multiplier numeric input. So as I mentioned before, it's a number between 0 and 10. Default is 1, which suggests parity with your current league. Anything less than 1 stipulates a weaker league than your own, and anything above 1 suggests a stronger league than your own. So here's an easy way to wrap your head around league multipliers a bit. Think of it like this. If a top striker in a given league scores 20 goals, how many do you reckon they manage if they played in your league? Now, if you're scouting someone from a stronger league, you might expect them to do even better. Let's say they maybe score 26 in your league setup. To figure out the multiplier, you just divide the expected 26 by the original 20, and that gives you 1.3. So in that case, 1.3 is your multiplier. Flip it the other way, say they're coming from a weaker league, just say they also 20 goals, but you reckon they struggle a bit more in your league and maybe they get 16. You can do the same thing here. 16 divided by 20 gives you 0.8. That's the kind of multiplier you'd go for there. Basically, you're just adjusting their output based on the level that they're coming from. So as mentioned earlier, you can also adjust individual statistic groups for each league, where an area of that league is perhaps stronger than what the base multiplier would suggest. Now if you tweak one of these stat group multipliers, the tool shows an average multiplier across all stat groups, plus a little arrow to show if the overall strength of all stat groups is above or below your base multiplier. Should you then update the base league multiplier itself, it will automatically propagate this new value to all stat groups whose multipliers still match the previous base value. So any stat group multipliers that have been individually customized will remain unchanged, thereby preserving your bespoke adjustments. If you change your mind with any of these stat group multipliers, you can always hit the reset stat group multipliers button to bring them all back in line with the base multiplier. Once you're happy with all your changes, you'll need to click the Update League Multipliers button at the bottom of the dialog window. This saves everything and triggers a fresh calculation of the Moneyball data, so all those lovely stats will update with your new League Multiplier values backed in. If you ever need to remove a League Multiplier you've added, maybe you've changed your mind or maybe you just clicked something in a moment of blind optimism, you've got a couple of ways to go about it. First, you can click on the bin or trash icon, whatever you want to call it, next to the league name at the top of the multipliers accordion section. Or if you're already poking around inside that section, there's also a delete league multiplier button tucked under the stat group section. Either way, once you've removed the multiplier, don't forget to hit the update league multipliers button down at the bottom of the dialog window. That's the bit that actually locks it all in and updates your Moneyball data. Now, if you're feeling very ruthless and want to wipe all of them in one go, maybe you want to start afresh, you can click the Delete League Multipliers button. That'll clear a lot, giving you a blank canvas to work from. So I'm now going to go over a few sort of practical examples. The idea here is to show how League Multipliers actually work, and how they can actually help you spot players whose stats might be flattered a bit by the level they're playing at, or the opposite, players whose numbers deserve a second look. So let's imagine you're managing in the third tier of a nation, and you're eyeing up 3 different strikers based on their goal performance. Player A, who's in your league, scores 17 goals. Player B is one level up in the second tier and they got 13 goals. And player C is down in the 5th tier and they're banging in 27 goals. Now on the surface, player C looks like a goal machine, but let's apply the following league multipliers. So for player B in the 2nd tier, they get 1.2, and for player C in the 5th tier, they get 0.65. Now we get the following adjusted value. So player A obviously stays at 17 goals because they're already in your league and there's no multiplier based on your league. Player B bumps up to 16 goals because they play in a better league, and player C drops from 27 goals all the way down to 18 goals. So yeah, in this scenario, player C still comes out on top, but only just, and that's after adjusting for the fact that they're probably playing against defenders who may still have a little smoke break at half time. Alright, next example, you're in the 2nd tier of a nation. This time you're comparing players based on their XG. So player A in your league has 8 XG. Player B, who's in the top tier, so league above, has an XG of 7. And player C, who's all the way down in 8th tier, with a massive 17 XG. Raw numbers here can be a bit misleading. So the multipliers here are 1.2 for the top tier and just 0.48 for the 8th tier. So player A stays on 8 XG, player B jumps up to 8.4, and player C crashes down to 8.16. Suddenly, it's tight between the 3 players. Player B does sneak ahead, but not by much. Player C looked like the next striking superstar, but now feels a little bit more like a non-league gamble. Might still be worth a punt though, but you want to make sure they're not just stat padding. So the first scenario, let's just imagine you're managing at the top flight of a nation. So So player A, who's in your league, has 55 completed tackles. Player B also plays in the first tier but of a higher reputation nation abroad with just 45. And player C is racking up 77 tackles in the second tier league of another nation that isn't exactly known for its quality. So here the multipliers are 1.45 for player B and 0.7 for player C. So player A remains at 55 tackles completed, player B climbs up to just over 50, and player C drops down to 54. So player A in your league still leads, but only just. Player C gives you similar numbers from a weaker league, while player B's playing in tougher matches but still keeping up. In short, player A is the safe pick, but if B or C are cheaper, then maybe worth rolling the dice. So last one, also in the top tier of a nation, player A in your league has 5 assists, player B in the third tier has 8 assists, and player C, who plays in the first tier of a higher reputation league abroad, has 6 assists. So multiplier this time is 0.79 for player B and 1.2 for player C. That gives 5 assists for player A, 6.32 for player B, and 7.2 for player C. So despite player B having the best raw numbers, it's actually player C who edges out once you factor in the league quality. And that's the point here. Player B's numbers are flattering, but only because they're tearing up against objectively weaker players. You want the truth behind stats, and that's where the multiplier steps in. So yeah, League Multipliers won't magically pick your dream signing, but they do help you make smart decisions and give it a bit more balance to the numbers. It's less guesswork and more grounded logic. So once your Moneyball calculation is done with League Multipliers applied, you'll start seeing which players, leagues and stats are affected by League Multipliers across the Moneyball tool. The Moneyball table brings this to life right away. Players and leagues influenced by a multiplier will be highlighted with a handy arrow icon next to their name. An upwards arrow means they're from a stronger league than yours. Down arrow means they're weaker. Hovering over the arrow gives you a tooltip with the multiplier breakdown. The division column works the same, so you have the same sort of color coding logic, and there's a neat little sparkle icon to stipulate a league multiplier is applied to the league. This sparkle icon is used throughout the Moneyball tool, so it becomes sort of synonymous with a league multiplier. So every relevant stat that's affected by a league multiplier, whether raw, derived, computed or action stat, also gets the same color coded sparkle icon, but it's in the top right corner of each stat badge. Hovering over a stat badge affected by a league multiplier and you'll get the usual percentile rank, but now it also includes multiplier info, including the specific multiplier for whichever statistic group that stat is part of, especially helpful if that stat group has a different multiplier than the base league multiplier. For derived, computed and action stats, the tooltip also includes base stats affected by league multipliers that are used in the calculation of the stat itself. Now over in the player info panel, if a player's in a league affected by multipliers, their league name shows the same color coded sparkle icon and tooltip. Down in the comparison chart section, if you hover over a radar line, be it the selected player, a comparison player, or the player that's best in the selected stat, and if they've got any multiplier affected stats, these stat badges will then show the same sparkle icon plus the exact multiplier next to each stat. Same deal in the top 10 stats and key area section. Anywhere a multiplier's had an effect, that sparkle icon will appear in the top right of the stat badges. Within the statistics section, for any stat group impacted by a league multiplier, a color-coded multiplier value will also appear alongside the group's heading. This reflects the specific stat group's multiplier for the player's league. For instance, while the base league multiplier might be 1.3, the goal statistic group could have a specific adjustment of 1.4. This nuance allows you to identify category-specific variations at a glance. Each individual stat within these groups, if affected by league multipliers, will also contain that sparkle icon in the top right corner of a stat badge. Now if you hop over to the player comparison dialog, it takes everything from the player info panel and carries over for both players. But to save us going around in circles, here's what's unique. In the side-by-side details comparison at the top on each player's name, they also get that same color-coded arrow icon as with the name cell in the table, so you can compare who's coming from a tougher league. The player's division also gets the same color-coded sparkle icon. Now in the statistics section for each stat group heading, it also defines the multiplier values for each player and they're wrapped in a dashed border. So it's a purple dashed border for the first selected player and green for the second player. Of course, if only one of the two selected players have a league multiplier applied to their stats, you'll only see the multiplier for each stat group for the player affected by a league multiplier. And finally, if you go to the Moneyball chart view, when hovering over any player in the chart, if that player is in an affected league, in the tooltip, any impacted stat on the X or Y axis also gets the same sparkle icon treatment to the stat badge. The division name also gets the same sparkle icon just to keep the visual language totally consistent across the whole tool. So if you ever fancy stripping back to basics, maybe just to get a cleaner look at all the players' raw numbers without all the league adjusted stats, you can simply click the Hide Multipliers button. That'll tell the system to recalculate the Moneyball data without factoring in any league multipliers. If, after examining the unmodified values, you decide to reinstate the league multipliers, clicking the Show Multipliers button will spin up a fresh recalculation, this time with the full league multiplier logic back in play. So one thing worth keeping in mind is that league multipliers aren't just something you set once and ignore forever. They're more like living values that constantly shift to reflect the ebb and flow of the football world. To keep your analysis of stats sharp and relevant, it's a good idea to review and tweak multipliers now and again, especially when the competitive landscape shifts. There are a few scenarios in which you may want to revisit your league multipliers, for example, if your club gets promoted or relegated, or if you join a club in a new league. The reputation of a league or your club shifts. You add new leagues mid-save that need to be updated. Changing your in-game language or installing name fixes, for example, you change the English Premier Division to be the English Premier League, or if you start a completely new save. Also worth for like seasonal check-ins, so even if you're managing the same club in the same league year after year, don't assume nothing's changed. Other leagues might have grown stronger or weaker, and keeping your multipliers up to date will help make sure your comparisons don't quietly slide out of sync. So thankfully, I thought ahead and made this process a little bit easier for you. Inside the Add League Multipliers dialog, you'll find the button called Offset All Multipliers. Clicking it reveals a number input where you can offset all multipliers up or down by the same amount. It's basically a quick way to nudge everything in the right direction without having to manually adjust each one. The value you enter gets applied across the board. It adjusts every single league multiplier along with their connected stat group multipliers, but exactly the number you've set in the input. If you enter a number below 0, you're telling the system that your current league has improved. This causes all other league multipliers to reduce, which tightens the gap between your league and the stronger ones, while also pushing your league further ahead of the weaker ones. Say you go for an offset of 0.25, a league that was sitting at 1.15, which was slightly better than yours, now drops to 0.9, making it now look slightly weaker. It also works the other way. If you enter something above 0, that signals a drop in your own league standards. The system then gives other leagues a little boost to reflect that. For example, if you put in 0.15, a league multiplier of 0.92 gets bumped up to 1.07, making that league seem stronger than yours and adjusting their player stats upwards to match. Once you're happy with the changes, just click the save button at the bottom. That'll trigger fresh calculation of all Moneyball data, now with your latest context spec'd in. Right, so that's everything for the new League Multipliers feature in the Moneyball tool. If you've got any feedback, thoughts, or stumble across an issue, just give me a shout. Always happy to hear from people who are actually using this tool. But that's not the only update I've got for FMDataLab. So this one came off the back of a suggestion in the last video. Someone had asked if I could add an option to the best 11 tools that just focuses purely on picking the best players by role score without worrying whether they can actually play in that position or not. And yeah, fair enough, that's now been added. Obviously there's a bit of a trade-off for this. With this option, the algorithm might decide that your best player is wasted at left back, so stick them in the centre mid instead to plug your weakest area, for example. On the best 11 upload pages, just below the tactic drop down and the file upload, you'll now see a new little checkbox labelled Assign to Playable Positions. It will be ticked by default the first time you come to this page. When that box is ticked, the algorithm behaves like it always did, where it assigns players to roles within positions they're actually able to play, based on the playable positions in your uploaded tactic. If you untick this checkbox though, it throws all of that out the window. Now it just goes off whoever's got the highest role score for each role, no matter where they're usually found on the pitch. That gives you a bit more freedom to play with stronger setups, or just experiment with the odd combinations to see what happens. Oh, and just so you're not locked into your choice, this same setting is available after uploading on the League Best 11 results page, so you can switch it on and off as you please without having to re-upload the file every time you change your mind. Now in some cases the outcome might not change either way. If your top role score players are actually already playing in their best positions, it won't make much difference. But if your squad's a bit lopsided or you're testing something weird, you're more likely to see a bit of a contrast. Anyway, that's it for me. Hope you find these new updates really helpful. If you've got any questions, spot anything that looks off, or just want to suggest something, drop it in the comments or fire me a message. So there's plenty more coming to FMDataLab, so if you're into this sort of thing, stick around, give the video a like, and subscribe. Alright, goodbye for now.